Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here again with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. How's it going today, Bernie?
Well, what's with the glasses, John?
So, as I was telling Bernie before we went on the air, having a bit of a tired eyes feeling this morning. Things are not focusing great. It's been a rough few weeks on a personal level. So, I'm wearing these today. I think they're very fashionable. I hope so. We'll see how those go.
They say that people who wear glasses either are or at least look intelligent. I don't know if that's true or not, but
uh,
uh,
Clearly not in my case. I don't think. But there you go. There you go. Well, great. So today we are going to start things off with a topic a subscriber suggested. After our last episode, Phyllis C., she's a regular commenter, she wrote this to you, Bernie. There is constant chatter between you and John about the real possibility of Trump being reelected. Are you willing to talk about what a new Trump administration looks like on matters of foreign policy, the economy, the border? Be honest, have you ever gone there in your head? And if so, are you willing to share? So I thought that was a good question from Phyllis, and I also thought it was an interesting topic. So Bernie, we'll start with you. If Trump does win next year, wins the primary, goes on to win the general election, what would you expect his second term to look like?
let me start with this, John. Trump's critics, from the moment, even before the moment he came down that elevator at Trump Tower, have been telling us you can't believe anything he says. Trump is lying if his mouth is open and his lips are moving. If you Google that, you'd probably find 100 gazillion references to liberal and progressive saying Trump is a liar. Don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. But now we're supposed to believe every word he says about what he would do if he's reelected. We're supposed to believe that if he's reelected, because he said it, that he's going to use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. He may do that. Trump has the personality and the lack of character that may make him do something like that. But I'm just fascinated, and I mean fascinated not in a good way, by his critics who are constantly telling us not to believe him. But now suddenly, when he says things that make him look bad, they want to believe him. I don't know. That strikes me as a tad hypocritical.
Well, I understand your point you're making there. I do. It's one of those things where
And that's not a defense of Donald Trump. I want to make that clear. He's
no,
capable
no.
of doing anything, but it's the hypocrisy that troubles me a little bit.
No, I see the point you're making there. At the same time on that particular topic, I there was a lot of stuff that happened, especially at the end of the Trump administration, that I never thought could possibly happen. And it's the denial of or peaceful transfer of power. I never saw a president, never thought a president was capable of blowing a crisis as badly as he did with the pandemic, as far as communicating things and trying to take a leadership role position. So I do sort of get that stuff that seems so outlandish. It used to seem so outlandish, and people would think, there's no way this would be an issue. We wouldn't have to worry about this. We saw him try to overturn an election at the end of at the end of his term. So yeah, now I'm a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more understanding. But you bring up a good point. He says a lot of stuff that does not come true, that he doesn't do, and that should be noted.
I interviewed a former CIA director in front of an audience in Los Angeles several years ago. Technically it was off the record, in that I wasn't supposed to write about it, but I'm going to share this much with you. He said, and it was a very liberal crowd in Los Angeles. I was brought in because they thought if they didn't have somebody like me, it would be just a nonstop Trump bashing event. And I was supposed to at least ask questions that might balance things out a little bit. And at one point, this former director of the CIA said that, and Trump was the president at the time, that when it's time for him to leave office, he may not leave. He may just try to stay in office. And I looked at a former director of the CIA and I said something like, "Are you kidding?" Come on, that's ridiculous.
I had that same experience. So I don't think she would mind me saying this, but A.B. Stoddard, who we've had as a guest on here before, we'll exchange emails every now and then. But I put something out on Twitter a few weeks before the election, kind of poo-pooing the idea, exactly the same idea that somebody put out there about him trying to stay in office. I just thought it was kind of silly. Trump does a lot of stuff. Did not think he was going to do that. She emailed me and said, "Are you sure about that? Because that's a real concern I have." And I said, "No, I don't think that." And then she ended up being right. And yeah, it kind of made me feel like, it wasn't foolish, because I don't think it was strange of me to think that he wouldn't do that. But
There you
it's what
go.
happened.
He did it. He
Yeah,
did it.
yeah,
So let's get to Phyllis's main point.
right.
I'll take the border as an opening area of discussion. Joe Biden's policy on the border, if there is a policy at all, is a disaster of monumental proportions. I mean, Mayorkas, his Secretary of Homeland Security, can say the border is secure all he wants. It isn't. All you have to do is turn on your TV and you see incredible things about people walking across, getting on trains and riding up to the border. And it's just an open border for all intents and purposes. Trump would turn that around. At absolute least, the border would be more secure than it is today. That in itself may not be saying much, but whatever policies he would institute, even without Congress, just as an executive order, would be better, by light years better, than what Joe Biden is doing regarding the border.
Oh yeah, no, I think there's something to that, because I think, on even when you don't look at the policies, the rhetoric does matter, and when Biden was running against Trump, and he was, basically putting out the word that things would be easier, people would have an easier time getting into this country, suggesting that got things moving. I mean, that was even before the election had actually happened, and people saw him as, possibly the next president. When he did become president, that things went in full gear. And he removed, and I can't remember the name, but one basic feature at first of the Trump border policy, and that was enough. I mean, that and the rhetoric was enough just to get people. So even just strong talk, even if you didn't even do anything differently, if you were out there saying there's no way we're going to let this, I'm going to allow this to happen, that actually makes a difference.
Let's talk about strong talk. The president of the United States is not the mayor of the United States, but there hasn't been strong talk about looting and running cars into stores and just grabbing anything you want, whether it's high-end merchandise or stuff at a drugstore, whatever it is. There's been no strong talk, as far as I can tell, from this administration about crime in America. Statistically, crime may be lower this year than last year, but there's way too much of the kind of crime that just makes your blood boil. When I see people going into stores, they get together on social media. So at a certain time, they arrive at a store and they rush in and they take whatever they want to walk out. I get furious. That in itself, I'm not going to vote for a Democrat in any event, but that in itself would get me to not vote for the Democratic nominee for president. Biden is not the mayor of the United States. I'll give him that. But where is the strong talk about crime? Now, if Trump were in charge, who knows? Who knows what he might do? But I think at least there'd be something from the bully pulpit about how this is unacceptable, just absolutely unacceptable. And I don't know that that would reduce the level of crime, but at least it would say we notice it and we're against it. I mean, that's important all by itself, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I would like to see strong talk on violence as well. At the same time, you did hear that from Trump during the 2020, the summer riots. and it didn't seem to do much good. So you bring up a good point about whether or not it's actually going to make a difference. We saw that was some of this worst writing we've ever seen. It was under Trump. He was out there speaking, but again, he wasn't a mayor either. No, he wasn't. This really doesn't fall within the responsibility in most cases of the federal government. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to change, but I think it would be good. I think it's harder when someone like Trump is out there saying that because he's so bombastic about everything and such a polarizing figure that I don't think people who would engage in violence are really listening, to him, or a lot of people that don't engage in violence are listening to him at that point. But I think it would be good to have some strong talk. I don't know, coming from a president, how much it's going to matter.
Here's something controversial, because anytime you talk about race, it's very controversial. People committing crimes on Wall Street look like you and me. Okay, they do. People looting stores, at least the ones I see on video, they're not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people wearing MAGA hats. They're just not. I would call in a charismatic black leader. I would ask Barack Obama. He wouldn't do it, but I would ask Barack Obama to say, this is not acceptable. You can't go into a store and take all the kind of sneakers you want because we're not going to buy the argument that you're depraved because you're deprived. No, stop it. You're making everybody who looks like you look bad. That's not fair. Most 99% of black people aren't looting stores. I want to make that clear. But the people who are, by and large, are people of color. I'm sorry, it's just true. And if you disagree, I really want to hear this, John, but it's just true. And the president of the United States can pick up a phone and call anybody he wants. I would call in somebody like Barack Obama and say, I need your help. And I know if this gets out, it's going to be Bernie Goldberg said black people are criminals. I'm not saying that. I'm saying 99% of black people aren't criminals, and 99% of white people don't steal on Wall Street, okay? But the ones who do on Wall Street are probably going to be white. And the ones who are looting stores, at least the ones I see on video and news clips on TV, are not white. They just aren't. I know they wear masks, but you can see enough to know that they're people of color, as that expression goes. Sorry, but it's true.
No, I think what you're saying, like you said, people will want to take that the wrong way, but I think it's a valid argument for sure. On Phyllis's question, so I was really glad that someone asked, because it is something I've thought. I have a lot of individual thoughts on as far as what a second Trump presidency will look like. So I may try to kind of get in a bunch. This may sound like a 3-minute filibuster. I'm gonna try to keep it as brief as I can, but I have a lot of little things on my outline that I wanted to touch on. So I hope you and the subscribers will bear with me a little bit. I'll start off by saying, and I think we kind of sort of talked about this already, that I do think it's hard to gauge with any real confidence what a second Trump term would look like, because the only real platform the guy is running on this time around, it seems to be political retribution. When he's not busy in court and he's not showing up at sporting events and waving to people, he's vowing to go after institutions and people that he believes have been mean to him or that have stood in his way. And he is throwing around a lot of authoritarian rhetoric. He's done that in the past, but he's definitely ratcheted it up. He doesn't seem to be running on law and order so much anymore. He tried to overturn the last election. He's since talked about suspending the Constitution. He has now fully embraced the January 6th rioters, many of them who are in prison. These are the people who, a lot of them beat the hell out of cops and wanted to hang his vice president. He insinuated a few months ago that he thought General Mark Milley, who was part of Trump's own administration, should be put to death for his loyalty. Not that I think Trump could do that, obviously, but and of course Trump is facing multiple indictments himself, which may be the main reason he's running again. But some things I do think are clear at this point is that I don't think, well, to me anyway, is that his second term would not look like his first term. Trump's best decisions in his first term, in my view, came during his first 2 years in office when he essentially deferred all these big ticket items to the GOP establishment: tax reform, regulatory relief, conservative judges. These were all, this was all traditional Republican stuff. And even on foreign policy, a lot of Trump supporters like to call his conservative critics, warmongers and neocons, and they're getting us into wars. But Trump's people forget this. His first big foreign policy decision was to bomb the hell out of Syria. To be clear, I thought it was the right move. Syria the government had used chemical weapons. I think that was a good thing. But at that time, I think Trump had a number of good, competent advisors around him. And I think he absolutely needed that because he clearly didn't know what he was doing when he became president. I mean, we all saw the debates. We understood his resume. He was this business brand and this pop culture celebrity who knew how to work a crowd. Definitely very charismatic guy, the cult of personality, but he had no real grasp of governing or legislative issues. But give him credit for that, or give credit to whoever helped him with it. But he had some good advisors who thankfully guided him and talked him out of some really bad ideas. And I promise I'll finish this speech up real quick, but what we did see over time, however, is that he drove a lot of those people away during his administration. He fired many of them, many quit, and he surrounded himself with more and more ass kissers who were far less likely to serve as guardrails and push back on his worst instincts. And I think it's those types of people that some people call them the throne sniffers, the loyalists who would serve in high-ranking positions in the next administration. I think that would be a very bad thing for the country, and leaving Trump alone to his own devices, not giving him good advice. And, one last thing, Trump has made it pretty clear in his rhetoric that he no longer believes he has the obligatory relationship that he did previously with the pro-life movement and in nominating Federalist Society judges. So I'll end my filibuster. Bernie, I know that was a lot. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I do about this time around.
Censors are weighing in.
See, it's what I said about race, if they were calling already.
Yeah, that's right.
It's about what you said about and what his critics say about how this time around he's going to appoint loyalists who will carry out his nefarious plans. Okay, that may be true because everything I'm saying is subjected to the idea I don't know what Trump is going to do in a second term if he's elected, but I just don't take him at his word necessarily. So about appointing loyalists, are loyalists really is that really going to be the problem given what his loyalists are now facing because they were loyal to him the first time around? I mean, how many of them have been indicted? How many of them could have gone to prison and may still go to prison unless they testify against him? Anybody with, half a brain is going to look at that and say, I don't want any part of that. He's going to ask me to do something. If I do it, I know what happened to Sidney Powell. I know what happened to people, the other lawyers that he had. I'm not going to join that administration and follow his orders all the way to the courtroom and be indicted and possibly convicted and possibly be sent to prison. So I hear that a lot, John. I hear that, the second term is going to be different because this time he's going to have his loyalists in there who are going to carry out the things he wants to do, his revenge campaign. They will be, maybe, everything is a maybe with him, but I'm not so sure about that because you have to be a total moron to want to join a campaign and do illegal things knowing what happened to the other people who were accused of doing illegal things.
That's a good point.
And I know that makes sense because I'm now wearing glasses.
Yes.
Wear glasses never say stupid things. I should have said that though.
No, I think that's a good point. At the same time, there are still a lot of people that would be loyal to Trump anyway. And it's just, I think he is more likely, people that are trying out for these jobs or throwing their hat into the rings, whatever. I think you're more likely to see incompetent loyalists than competent people who are more loyal to the Constitution, if that makes sense. Because you say, look at what happened to all these people. On the other hand, look at what happened to people who weren't like that, that were part of the administration, the John Kelly, the Mad Dog, Mattis, is that it? All these other people, that served and were tossed out. These were competent people, smart people. There's a lot of them. John Bolton's another one. People kind of scoff at his name, but there's, all these people that had a good background. They were, Nikki Haley is another one of them. But, I have a harder time seeing those types of people working for a Trump administration than I do, maybe not as radical as like a Roger Stone, but, just anybody who's going to come in and regularly tell Trump how great he is and not really take the job as seriously as it should, not show the same loyalty to the Constitution that some of these other people would. So yeah, again, a lot of questions. It's hard to understand why anybody would work in a Trump administration other than the prestige of it, other than having that, position of power.
On that, you make a good point. Every now and then, John, you stumble onto a point that makes sense. You're wearing glasses, of course. Yes. I don't see a William Barr type saying, sure, I'll be Attorney General.
Right.
Unless there's a conversation beforehand, which would be a useless conversation, where the Attorney General appointee says, Mr. President, I want to make sure we understand something here. If you ask me to do something I don't think is proper, I'm not going to do it. Because no matter what Trump says, doesn't matter. If he doesn't do it, Trump's going to call him an idiot, He's going to call him names, try to humiliate him, as he's done with a million other people who tried to do the right thing. So you make a good point, John, about he may have a tougher time finding competent people. And you also make a good point that there's no shortage of incompetent people. I just think you have to be pretty damn stupid to want to join an administration where you're going to be asked to do, you may be asked to do things that are potentially illegal. That I don't think people are going to be willing to do, knowing what happened to other people who were asked and allegedly did do things that were illegal. I think they'll look at what's happening to people like that and say, I don't need that. So let me review. Yes, it's going to be harder to find really good, competent people because they'll know what he's going to say to them if he doesn't do everything they want. Are there enough incompetent people or loyalists that are? Yes, there are. But even they are going to take a hard look and say no if he asks them to do something that's going to get them wind up in a courtroom the way others who didn't say no wound up in a courtroom. I think you have to be pretty loyal and pretty dumb to just go along with anything President Donald Trump would ask them to do, anything.
Well, George Santos is a free agent now, so he might be at the top of the list to come in. He's fine with breaking the rules, breaking the laws, so yeah, someone to look out for.
George Santos is with me today, by the way. I don't know if you know, he's sitting right next to me. Yes. But he doesn't want to come on camera.
Right, and he served in a lot of these high-ranking positions already in presidential administrations.
Hold on just a second. George says he would not accept the job as Attorney General in the Trump administration, even though he's a Harvard-educated lawyer. What's Harvard-educated, right? But he's sitting right here. He was visiting today.
Yeah, AG is kind of lowbrow for him, a position. So yeah, he needs something a little higher, I think. But so we'll go ahead, go on to the next topic. We went a little long on this, so maybe we'll try to keep this next one a little briefer. That was a lot of it was my fault with my little speech there, my little soapbox. But so in the interest of fairness, we should probably speculate at least a little as to what a second Biden term might look like. As is the case with Trump, it's not set in stone that Biden will actually be the party's nominee, but I think that's the likely outcome. Bernie, do you think Biden would grow increasingly progressive in the next 4 years, or do you think that he'll moderate a bit with less pressure, maybe from the activists, because he's he won't be running after that? Or do you think he'll bail out after 6 months and we'll end up with President Harris?
I think that. I don't know if he'll bail out in 6 months, but I don't think if he's elected, he's going to be president for 4 years. So a vote for Joe Biden essentially is a vote for Kamala Harris. What do I think his second term would look like? Let me give you a one-word answer, and then I'll go into some detail. I think it would be a disaster. But you ask an interesting question that I'm not sure I have an answer to at this point. Would he be more progressive now that he's free to be more progressive? Because he fancies himself a second Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was pretty damn progressive. So he might go in that direction. Or he might say to the squad and the progressives who have been yanking on his chain pulling him to the left, he might say, screw all of you. I was never that way in real life. I accommodated you because I needed your support. I don't need your support anymore. Call me whatever you want. I'm going to be a moderate, middle of the road Democrat. Is that possible? Yes. But I think his first term, if it's any indication of what his second term would be like, I'll go back to the one word, a disaster.
Now, and like you, I have a very hard time envisioning Biden being in office for another 4 years after this first term. But I suspect, like you said, he'll continue to drive through more progressive legislation, a lot of it probably directed at key Democratic voting blocks, like he tried to do with the student loan debt. Very glad he failed with that. I don't think he'll ever be a uniter. You know, he sort of ran on that for his first term. It didn't happen. It would have been the best move, but he didn't go that route. He continued to work the partisan wedge. It'll be interesting to see, to me anyway, what the Ukraine situation looks like by then. I think Biden has actually been better on that issue than a lot of the GOP has, which is kind of sad to me as a Reagan Republican. But the Russia-Ukraine war may not even be a thing by then. Who knows? Also, I think one thing that I'm confident is that Biden will continue to push really bad policies on Iran. He seems really to keep doubling down on this idea of giving them money and hoping for concessions, and it seems like it's just going to continue to fail. So with that, I have some confidence. I think that's going to continue on.
A disaster.
All right. So for our last topic, we're going to talk about your latest column that went up Monday. It has to do with our divided nation and how neither side of the U.S. political spectrum is interested really in what the other side has to say. Bernie, can you go into that a little more and sort of lay out the argument and the points you made?
Yeah, I'll go into it just a little more. I don't think anybody in the world of politics, and I don't mean being a politician, I mean talking about politics. I don't think anybody can convince anybody of anything. I don't think, no matter how nuanced the argument one makes, no matter how reasonable the argument is, I don't think people can change anybody's mind anymore. I know that's a broad generalization because obviously it's not 100% true, but I think it's generally true that we're so locked into our positions regarding politics that no matter what the other guy says, no matter how reasoned the other guy's argument is, no matter how thoughtful, intelligent it might be, you're talking to a brick wall. Because I witnessed just recently, I was sitting right there when it happened. Somebody a MAGA Republican, started talking like a MAGA Republican. And the woman sitting next to me just sort of shook her head in disgust and got up and left. Didn't say a word. Just in total disgust, got up and left. And the MAGA Republican said to me, "She a liberal?" And I know the woman. I said, "Yeah, she is." And then he said something I won't repeat because kids might be watching. I mean, that's a minor little example, but it is an example of you're a liberal. I don't want to, you're whatever he called her. you're a MAGA Republican. I don't even want to be in the same room with you. A vignette that signifies something much bigger, I think. And as I say, the something much bigger is, I don't think people can change anybody's mind anymore. And if that's true, you see, the reason we have discussions, the reason we have dialogue, theoretically, I don't want to be too highfalutin here, but theoretically is to arrive at some kind of truth. That isn't happening. I believe one thing, the other guy believes something else. I don't want to, he's not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change his mind. And the worst place for this, the worst place, the best example, if you don't believe what I'm saying, turn on Fox, CNN, or MSNBC. Nobody changes anybody's mind on those channels. Great example in living color. Just turn it on and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
No, that's true. And I think the ability to persuade people isn't gone. I just think people with the loudest voices and the biggest soapboxes aren't really trying to do it anymore. They're not really trying to persuade people. But at the same, so I'll bring up something that's sort of interesting that goes into what you talked about with that conversation you overheard. So we have a regular commenter named Thomas. You're familiar with him. He's a big Trump guy, a big MAGA guy. But he wrote in response to your column from Monday, he wrote this, or he asked this question: how do I begin to understand or reason with a person who believes that abortion in the third trimester is a reasonable position and an opinion this hypothetical person holds with pride and honor under the guise of women's rights? So he's sort of latched onto this one area.
Let me jump in.
Yeah.
Nobody is expected to be persuaded, to use your word, by Adolf Hitler saying, you know, I think exterminating 6 million Jews would be a good idea. Well, and then the other person says, well, yeah, you make a good point. Let me think about that. No, and I'm not expecting anybody to say, any reasonable person to say, oh, you think abortion because you've changed your mind about giving birth to a baby 9 months in. Well, let me think, that may be a good idea. No, I'm not, but Thomas is picking the most extreme argument. There is that's extreme.
Right.
No, I don't expect people to be persuaded by some totally unreasonable argument. But there's everything less than that. There's, what do you think about the border? Should we do this or that? What about taxes? I think taxes should be lower. You may think they should be higher. Let's have a discussion. Try to convince me. But Thomas, come on, man. You know, it's like Joe Biden. Come on, man. You can't pick the most extreme argument to knock down my argument that people aren't persuaded by reasonable arguments anymore. Come on, that's not even fair.
Okay, now I'm glad you said that. I was going to get into that a little bit. So we had a few months ago, we had David French on from the New York Times. I thought it was a very thoughtful discussion. He always talks about, and I think what happened here, he calls this phenomenon nut picking, where you basically pick some radical position on the other side of the aisle and define the entire, movement, as by that radical position and declare them unreasonable. And I think you're right. I think most people, including most pro-choice people, would find late trimester abortion just terrible. And so but his phrasing was sort of interesting because he asked this, how do I understand someone like that? At the same time, I'm curious if he would see any, and he'll comment on this, I'm sure, if he would see any validity in someone using that same phrasing, how do I begin to understand or reason with a person who believes that Donald Trump won the last election, or who believes that it's okay for him to try and overturn U.S. democracy to stay in power? I'm not comparing those two, but they are, they're two different spectrums, two different things. But both are these radical, polarizing, highly unsupportable positions that a lot of people would tell you everything you need to know about people who hold those positions. I'm sure we're the same, Bernie, in that we both have friends that are pro-choice, big pro-choicers. We have friends that believe in wacky conspiracy theories. And so in many cases, I think the secrets to maintaining those friendships is to avoid talking about politics altogether. But I do understand the dilemma that you spelled out in your column. I get why both sides reflexively don't want to listen to each other. I don't think it's a good thing. I love hearing smart, respectful debates. But I think a lot of people, to some degree, have been radicalized, and there's a lot of that nut picking that's going on, and it makes all those things make it very hard to have a smart debate on these issues.
I'm going to make an immodest point. I made a reasonable argument. I'm not saying I made a smart argument or a brilliant argument. I made a reasonable argument that people aren't persuaded by the other guy's opinion anymore. That's a generalization. I don't mean 100%, but I mean pretty close to 100%, at least in what I've witnessed. And that's a reasonable argument to make. And anybody who wants to knock it down by making extreme arguments, well, how could you support a 9-month abort? How could you support, anything that's on the fringe, on the end of the spectrum? That's not what I was talking about. And I think reasonable people who read the column know what I was talking about. I hope they do.
No, I agree. I think it's an important point. I think, I would love to see those who are genuinely interested in persuading people on good ideas. I wish they had a better soapbox. Another commenter, and we'll wrap this up shortly. I know this episode's gone a little long, but one commenter said where he really goes to find those discussions these days are podcasts, where it's not these 5-minute, cable segments where people are kind of shouting back and forth. Nobody's really getting anything from that other than, cheers at home and all that stuff. So I think podcasts are a place. At the same time, I know podcasts are becoming more and more popular. I don't know if that's big enough of a megaphone.
Well, if you don't have, let me make this clear. If you don't have an opinion on a certain subject, somebody making an intelligent point on a podcast or any place else may convince you to have their position. But that's only if you don't already hold a position. If you already hold a position, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to move off of that position because the other guy convinced you that you're wrong and he's right. That's what I'm saying. If you come into something political and say, well, I don't know how I feel about the border. Come on, you should know how you feel about the border. But if you don't, then you might be persuaded by an argument. I don't know how I feel about taxes. Maybe they should be higher. Well, come on. I mean, we're talking about people who aren't plugged into the political world at all. They could be persuaded. They could be persuaded to buy a bridge in Brooklyn for the right price. But if you have an opinion, if you're plugged into current events, if you've thought about things, you're going to be very difficult for someone to get you off of your position and onto their position.
No, it's true. It's true. Well, we should probably go ahead and wrap things up there. I want to thank you, Bernie, for always meeting with me. I always enjoy these conversations. I want to thank everybody, for all the subscribers, for tuning in. Tell your friends, let them know about what we're doing here. Bernie, did you want to add anything?
One thing, it's the holiday season. Christmas is coming. Hanukkah is coming. Kwanzaa is coming for some people. This would be, I hate to plug our own website, but this would be a good time for a gift subscription. You can give it to somebody who thinks the way you do, who you think would agree with, basically with my take on life or John's take on life. Or, and this would be fun, you can give it to a liberal friend, even a progressive friend, to drive them nuts. That might give you satisfaction.
That's right. That's right. And I will add a link to the bottom of it.
I know I'm making a good point because intelligent people make good points.
That's right. That's right. And I'm going to add a link to the bottom of this episode that goes straight to a gift subscription. It makes it very easy to to send it to somebody else. All right, Bernie, thanks again. Thank you, everybody. You have a great day. All right.
You too, John.
Thank you.